They didn't see her coming. Not when she stepped through the tall glass doors. Not when she walked across the marble floor in shoes that whispered power. Not even when she stood in the center of the room, silent and unshaken, while they looked past her like she didn't exist. But they should have. Because that moment, the one where they mistook her for the assistant, was the exact moment their world began to crack. In the sprawling city of Dantara, where steel towers cut the clouds and the streets hummed with wealth, there stood a towering building of chrome and tinted glass, the headquarters of Corlane Global. It was a company known for its brilliance, feared for its politics, and respected in boardrooms from Nairobi to New York. But behind its polished image, behind the smiles and carefully worded mission statements, was a rot no one dared name. It was Monday. The 39th floor smelled like fresh ink and glass cleaner. A new class of interns lined up along the main corridor. Some shifted nervously, others fidgeted with their cuffs. All wore sharp suits and polite faces. They looked like they belonged. At least most of them. Among them stood Leona Hart, 26. Dark-skinned, sharp eyes. Her posture was perfect, her chin raised just enough to suggest she noticed everything. She wore a charcoal jacket, beige blouse, and low black heels. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her hands gently clasped in front of her. Unlike the others, she wasn't looking around in awe. She had studied this place for months. She knew the org chart, the building layout, and even the confidential projects most staff didn't know existed. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She waited. The interns were told to introduce themselves to the head of strategic operations, Dane Colcroft. Man with a clean shave and a jaw that looked like it had never unclenched. He moved down the line, hand outstretched, repeating the same empty greeting like a worn-out record. Then he got to Leona. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't even look directly at her. Instead, with a smirk tugging at one corner of his mouth, he clapped her on the shoulder and said, loud enough for the others to hear, "Hope someone here knows how to fix the espresso machine. It's been acting up again." Some laughed. Most smiled awkwardly. Leona did neither. She nodded once, calm and unreadable. At lunch, she found a spot by the west windows in the staff lounge. The sunlight hit the stone table just right, and her notes, perfectly color-coded, referenced against quarterly reports, lay open in front of her. She took a quiet sip of coffee. That's when the voice came again. "This table's usually kept for executive staff," Dane said, suddenly. Behind her. "Might be better to sit closer to the vending machines." His tone was casual, almost friendly. But his eyes weren't. She stared at him for half a second, gave a nod, and packed her things without a word. The rest of the day blurred under a dull fog of belittlement. Her badge, printed in bold as L. Hart, was repeatedly ignored. During orientation, the facilitator called her young lady instead of her name. A senior manager stopped at her desk and asked which high school she was shadowing from. Later that afternoon, at the kickoff meeting for the new data initiative, she tried to explain her graduate thesis on behavioral analytics. But halfway through her first sentence, Wes Connors, a junior associate with a loud voice and louder ego, cut her off. "Sounds like another TikTok theory," he joked. People laughed. She didn't. When the day ended, she left the building last. Not by accident. She wanted the quiet. Her ride arrived. She got in, stared at the buildings flashing by, and replayed the audio she'd recorded that morning during the team huddle. Her phone had been on her notebook. The mic had been live. Dane's voice played clear as glass. "Let's hope this bunch is ready to learn what business really looks like, especially those from different backgrounds." She closed the file. That night, Leona didn't write a journal. She didn't vent to friends. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up the company's architecture files. She already had access to places she wasn't meant to, places like the data sandbox server. She wasn't just watching. She was preparing. At 10 o'clock the next morning, a bright purple folder landed on her desk. No sender, just her name in clumsy handwriting. Inside, diagrams of email etiquette, posters about smiling more, and definitions for basic office words. She didn't react. Just flipped through the materials with a steady face. She didn't toss it. She filed it, like evidence. By noon, her first major meeting invite arrived. The invite had arrived late, as if it were an afterthought. By the time Leona reached the room, only one chair remained, the one directly under. The ceiling vent that hissed like a snake judging every move she'd make. Still, she took it without hesitation. The conference room on the 8th floor was large, cold, and full of practiced smiles. Around the long polished table sat people with titles stitched to their confidence. Department heads, senior consultants flown in from other cities, and team leads who wore ambition like armor. Leona was the only one without a title, without. All eyes. At the far end lounged Dane Colcroft, as relaxed as a man could pretend to be. One arm draped across his seat, he flipped lazily through a printed packet of proposals, barely pretending to care. His smirk was still there, the one that never really left his face. When her name was called, Leona rose. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't apologize. She clicked her remote and let her slides fill the wall screen. The title, Forecasting Volatility in Decentralized Tech Markets. Her voice didn't shake. Each word was measured. Each number came with clarity. It wasn't just a presentation. It was precision dressed as calm. She walked them through two models. One based on current global trends, the other on behavioral shifts she had mapped in her private research. Halfway through the second model, as she spoke of risk clusters and adaptive strategies, she saw Dane lean toward the man seated next to him. His whisper wasn't subtle. She's really into this. Reminds me of myself when I was 19. No laughter, just a shift. A small change in the room's atmosphere. A few polite smiles, a couple of eyes dropping to the table. Asterisk, the kind of shift that said more than noise ever could. Leona didn't pause. She didn't acknowledge the comment. She finished. Clicked the final slide. Thanked the room. Collected her laptop and walked out as the next presenter shuffled forward. No one stopped her. No one had questions. No one challenged the data she had worked months to compile. And that, too, was part of the design. The elevator ride down was silent. She stood alone, staring at her own reflection in the brushed steel doors. When the screen flickered, she pulled up her slides again, not to revise, but to give her hand something to do while her chest tightened. The sting was familiar now. The next morning, the pattern deepened. Her system login was blocked for 15 minutes due to an unexpected credential update. She missed the first sync meeting. When she checked her email, a calendar invite for the quarterly review had landed, 5 minutes after the meeting had already ended. She tried to use the Intern lunch code at the cafe downstairs. It didn't work. The app glitched. The cashier looked annoyed. She paid full price without a word. Each of these things on their own seemed minor, forgettable, but together, they felt like carefully placed stones in her path, not big enough to trip her, just enough to slow her down. Thursday brought a new kind of theft. The vice president of operations stood at the front of the weekly town hall, praising a new data model that had apparently reshaped their strategy planning. The description was familiar. The visuals on the slide even more so. It was her work, her formatting, her terminology. But someone else's name on the project. Someone she had never met. Applause broke out. Dane clapped, sitting front and center. Smiling like a proud uncle, Leona clapped once. Her hands steady, her expression still. That afternoon, as she waited for the elevator, a young analyst approached her awkwardly. His voice was soft, like someone unsure if they were allowed to speak. "Hey," he said, glancing at her ID badge. "Just wanted to say, I think your work's really good." "Thank you," she replied with a nod. He hesitated. "Just, might want to keep some of your ideas a bit lighter. You're kinda head of the room, you know." She gave him a smile so small it vanished before it could be noticed. He meant, well, that didn't mean he wasn't part of the problem. She filed it away, under condescension, cloaked as advice. Friday delivered the latest insult. An all-staff email titled Professional Development Resources landed in just one inbox on her floor, hers. Attached was a PDF titled Career Foundations. On the cover was a cartoon owl in a graduation cap with speech bubbles that said, "Stay curious." And teamwork makes the dream work. She didn't delete it. She printed it, hole-punched the corners, and added it to the thick binder she kept hidden in her bottom drawer. An archive of every passive slight, every bureaucratic dig. By the time she left the office, the heat outside had wrapped around. The city like a fever. From the back seat of her cab, she made a call. Her voice was flat, stripped of emotion. "Yes," she said. "Phase 1 is complete. We'll consolidate board data in Q3. No resistance yet. Just camouflage." She ended the call. When she returned to her desk the following Monday, her chair was gone. So was her second monitor. The small plant she had brought from home had vanished too. In their place was an empty cubicle marked with tape and a printed sign, "Reserved for facilities." "Do not move equipment." She looked around. No one met her eyes. A few stared at their screens harder than necessary. A young man from IT passed by, stopped, then half whispered, Yeah, looks like you've been reassigned. Approved late Friday. I think there's a map." He handed her a paper. On it, a red circle marked a room. Storage 2A, overflow collaboration. It was on the far edge of the 3rd floor, far from her team, far from anything. She walked there slowly, her heels tapping against polished cement. She passed wide glass offices that reflected her like a stranger. She didn't slow. She didn't speak. When she opened the door, it let out a groan. The lights flickered. The room smelled of old carpet glue and stale air. Inside were 2 metal desks, scarred and dented. One lamp buzzed with a dying bulb. A computer monitor sat humming, but the screen stayed black. The only window was fogged with age. On the corner of the desk, a sticky note read, "L. Hart." As if someone had to prove she existed, she sat down, opened her laptop. The Wi-Fi was barely functioning. Her calendar didn't sync. She waited, counted her breaths. After 20 minutes, she connected to the server, opened the contact directory. Her name no longer showed a department. Her title was gone. Next to her name, unassigned, pending role confirmation. Even her avatar, once a headshot uploaded during onboarding, had been replaced with a blank gray silhouette. She opened the team chat thread. The name had changed. She had been removed. Her workspace erased. But she was still there, watching, recording, remembering, because Leona Hart didn't need a desk to matter. She was the test they didn't know they were failing. And the report card was coming soon. That afternoon, Leona's inbox chimed with a new message bolded and flagged as priority. It was from Human Resources. Subject line, Lunch and Learn, Growth for Emerging Talent. The featured workshop? How to receive feedback without being defensive. A seat had already been reserved in her name. There was no RSVP button, just a calendar block and the quiet weight of expectation. At noon, she walked past the bustling cafeteria, alive with laughter, clinking trays, and energetic side conversations, and made her way to the training annex. The hallway grew quieter with every step. She opened the door and stepped into a space that looked like it had been forgotten by time. 5 metal chairs stood in a semicircle. The table at the front sagged slightly in the middle. A tray of sad, cold sandwiches sat nearby, wrapped in cling film. One looked like it had wilted under fluorescent lights. On the far wall, a projector displayed an amateur-looking slide deck. Bright colors, cartoons, Comic Sans. A woman in her late 20s approached, corporate smile fixed tight, name tag slightly peeling. "Hi. So glad you could join us," she said, handing Leona a pen with the company's logo and a printed worksheet. At the top of the worksheet, reflecting on redirection. The first prompt read, "Describe a time you were professionally corrected. What did you learn?" Leona stared at the paper. Then, in clean handwriting, she wrote, "No comment yet." The second question asked how she responded to feedback in group settings. Again, she answered, "No comment yet." And so it continued, down all 10 questions. She turned in the sheet. No eye contact, no smile. She didn't stay for the closing. Remarks, back in storage too. Her chair creaked as she sat. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The air was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that wraps around you and presses into your ribs. She opened her laptop and logged into her personal documentation system, her own archive of erasure. Each entry had its own file, its own trail. Today's additions, redirected to junior development seminar, isolated session not attended by peers, content condescending, RSVP forced. Reflection data retained by HR. She saved the file and tagged it, image control tactic. Benevolent framing. It wasn't about fixing her. It was about teaching her to smile while disappearing. By midweek, another layer peeled away. She tried to access the product leadership dashboard. A lock icon blinked red. Access denied. Then it happened again on the roadmap viewer. Then the Team Analytics portal. All her executive-level access had been revoked. She submitted a help ticket. IT responded within the hour. Your permissions have been modified as part of an internal realignment. Please direct any inquiries to your direct supervisor. She had no supervisor. She replied to the thread. The follow-up came back. Your management. Alignment review is scheduled for next quarter. Further updates pending. She sat back. Let the monitor glare against her face. At home, later that night, she created a new heading in her report. Term: role displacement via technical obfuscation. Definition: strip access while disguising intent behind scheduled bureaucracy. Thursday morning, she attempted to join her team's virtual stand-up, the same link she'd used for weeks. The screen blinked once, then showed, "Meeting not found." 5 minutes later, an email popped up from a former colleague. "Hey, sorry about the mix-up. The weeklies got shifted to a private invite list for alignment purposes. Shouldn't be a big deal. Let me know if you need anything." She copied the headers. Logged the name under, "Silent Supporters, Tier 2. Aware but passive." Friday morning. A box appeared at her desk, shrink-wrapped, branded. Inside, a hoodie with the company's crest, a plastic mousepad, and a water bottle. The card inside read in bubble letters, "You're learning. You're growing. You're essential." The label, addressed it to Leona Hart, temporary assignment rotation. She ran her fingers over the warped logo on the bottle. It felt cheap, off-center, an afterthought. She resealed the box and slid it behind the heater with the others. That weekend, her apartment became a war room. The far wall was covered in diagrams color-coded and connected with string. Each dot marked an incident. Each color carried weight: green for indirection, yellow for targeted diminishment, red for active erasure. Together, they formed a shape, a system, a method. Leona wasn't being overlooked. She was being systematically erased. And she was mapping it. The next Friday brought the company's flagship event, the annual Innovation Showcase. A networking gala disguised as meritocracy. Everyone was required to attend, even her. She arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a structured navy dress with a high collar and tailored seams. Her hair was pinned in an intricate knot. Her heels were low, but sharp. She moved with quiet certainty. Under her arm, she carried a thin black folder. Inside, her strategic proposal, a cross-sector market entry initiative grounded in real data, future-proofed models, and 3 scalable rollout plans. At the reception table, she stepped forward. "Name?" the woman behind the desk asked. Without looking up, "Leona Hart." The woman searched the table, then handed her a blank white sticker and a marker. Leona looked to the right. There sat the real name tags, gold-brushed plates in velvet boxes, engraved in bold serif font. She took the sticker, wrote her name in firm black lines, and pressed it onto her chest like a scar. She moved into the main hall. Music played softly. Screens flashed with demo reels. Tables held glossy brochures and complimentary notebooks. No one greeted her. No one asked her name. She stood in the shadows near a potted plant, close enough to see, but far enough to disappear. Dane Colcroft walked on stage a few moments later. His suit was impeccable, his tie was red, his smile practiced. He welcomed the crowd, praised the company's growth, and called the culture a beacon of innovation, equality, and shared success. He spread his arms as he spoke, nodding slowly like a preacher mid-sermon. His eyes scanned the crowd. Passed over Leona. No recognition, no surprise, just absence. She waited. When the proposals were called for, she stepped forward and placed her binder neatly on the submission table. The assistant accepted it with a nod, no comment. She returned to her quiet spot and watched. 3 days later, the binder came back to her desk in a plain envelope. It hadn't been opened. The seal was intact. She emailed the proposal team. The reply came 2 hours later from someone she'd never met. "Thanks for your submission. Unfortunately, it did not meet our internal formatting guidelines and was not escalated. Please refer to the design guide for future proposals." She opened the design guide. It was for booth banners, font sizes, image bleed, color contrast. Nothing to do with strategic documentation. She didn't laugh. She didn't cry. She returned to her board and added a new tag: Method, Executive Avoidance via Visual Pretext. In small text beneath, proof of rejection lies in the untouched seal. Later that afternoon, while seated at her dim desk in Storage 2A, Leona overheard voices just outside the thin wall. 2 junior analysts were chatting by the water cooler, casual, unaware that every word was reaching the wrong ears. "I heard they're locking down who can submit strategy proposals now," one said. "Yeah," the other replied. "Only pre-approved contributors from now on. Keeps things efficient." They laughed. Paper cups crinkled. Leona's name wasn't on that list. Her thoughts, her models, her insight weren't denied. They were just erased. Not debated, not rejected, simply gone. The next day, she made her way to a cross-functional workshop she'd been invited to weeks ago. The session was about competitive intelligence, something she had quietly contributed to already. At the door, a security guard blocked her path. "Sorry," he said, looking at her badge. "You're not on the registration sheet." She pulled out her phone, showed him the calendar invite. He shrugged. "I still can't let you in without a list confirmation." Behind her, a woman in line whispered, "Isn't she from vendor logistics or something?" Leona said nothing. She stepped aside, calm as ever, turned away, and walked back down the corridor. Her heels tapped slowly over polished tile. Back in Storage 2A, she opened her report. Added a new entry: phase, nullification complete. She now had no input, no access, no assigned title. But she was still present, still tracing the company's cultural fractures. That evening, she drafted a memo, not to send, but to simulate. It was written as if she were advising a client on institutional breakdown. She outlined the exact method: Strip an employee's role without confrontation. Reduce their visibility through digital silence. Deny access through plausible error. Encourage doubt through subtle exclusion. The result? Turn a person into a ghost and make them question whether they ever had form at all. She traced the breakdown back to a junior coordinator who apologized when she reached out. "Just a clerical error," he said. "You should still attend," so she prepared again. That Friday, the room was large and featureless. No windows. 3 projection screens lined the front wall, with a team of tech staff prepping for presentations. These were high-level pitches. Strategy leads, rising department stars, and carefully selected guests. Leona arrived early, 5 minutes before start time. She wore a fitted black suit, clean lines, low-polished heels. Her hair was parted and pinned with symmetry. She looked like a leader. She connected her laptop at the presenter's desk, checked the HDMI feed, cued her slides. Her title slide came up, Repositioning in Saturated Sectors, a risk-adapted model. Below that, a quote from the company's founder, "Leadership isn't legacy, it's character under pressure." The room was still filling when the AV tech gave her a nod and walked away. 3 minutes before her scheduled slot, the screen glitched. Her deck disappeared. The screensaver returned, a swirling company logo in grayscale. She looked down. The HDMI cable had been unplugged. A tech assistant, maybe 19, maybe 20, with a crew cut and a wad of gum in his cheek, walked over casually. "Sorry," he said, with a shrug that felt too rehearsed. "This space is reserved for official department leads. Interns. Gotta get prior clearance. You might want to try one of the rooms downstairs." He said it loud enough to be heard. Heads turned. A few murmurs rippled. Eyes flicked toward her, then back to screens and notes. Her name was still printed in the event program. No one mentioned it. She said nothing. Closed her laptop, collected her papers, walked out. No one followed. No one apologized. No one corrected the mistake. Later that day, she tapped her badge at the executive elevator. The scanner lit green. The doors opened. Inside stood 3 directors in slate suits, mid-50s, smooth voices, measured laughter. She stepped in. They glanced at her badge, then her face. One of them stepped backward slowly. "I think we'll take the next one," he said with a chuckle. Another added, "Aren't these elevators restricted? Must be free ride week." The third stayed quiet, but tapped at his phone like he was already reporting it. Leona didn't flinch. She stared straight ahead, hands relaxed, breathing even. At the 10th floor, the doors slid open. She stepped out. Behind her, one of them muttered just loud enough, "Back doors are always how they try to get in." That evening, she received an automated email. Subject: Badge permissions update. Status changed. Her internal access was now set to general. Entry only. She forwarded the email to herself, archived it under category: symbolic revocation. The next morning, her name was missing from the list of participants in the firm's Friday Innovation Workshop. She had submitted her abstract weeks earlier. She emailed the coordinator. The reply came quickly. "Hi Leona, thanks for following up. The roster's full, and your submission didn't align with this quarter's themes. Appreciate your interest." She opened the internal portal. Searched the list of accepted topics. Her abstract, word for word, appeared under a different team. A senior group, sponsored internally. Repackaged with a new title, she closed the tab. Opened her personal log. Attached a timestamp. New entry. Intellectual property realigned under preferred groups. She didn't weep. She didn't rant. She recorded. She adapted. That Friday, while the innovation workshop buzzed, she stood near the catering tables, just outside the spotlight. Invisible by design. From the main stage, Dane Colcroft spoke once again. "Inclusion," he said, pausing like a stage actor, "isn't just a value, it's our future." He quoted a Harvard Business Review study on equity, gestured as if blessing the crowd, smiled like a man in command. People clapped. Leona did not. The following Monday, she returned to Storage 2A to find her setup altered again. Her second monitor gone, her keyboard replaced with a rattling wired model, 3 keys missing. Her headphones missing entirely. A sticky note sat where her plant used to be. Resources temporarily reallocated. "Thank you for understanding." No name, no context. She sat, opened her email, and saw a mandatory internal survey waiting. Subject line: Leadership Succession Insight Questionnaire. She clicked. The tone seemed neutral at first, but by question 3, it shifted. Should leadership roles be limited to individuals with at least 10 years of industry experience? Then, do you believe employees under 30 have the maturity to guide billion-dollar divisions? Then it became clearer. Should companies continue prioritizing candidates from historically underrepresented backgrounds, even if others perform better in traditional evaluations? Leona stared at the questions. Each was a seed, designed not to learn, but to sway, not to ask, but to reinforce fear. It wasn't a survey. It was a test, a trap, a whisper campaign with checkbox camouflage. She didn't fill it out. She screenshotted every screen, scanned the tracking scripts hidden at the bottom, scripts that recorded every click. She traced the metadata. It led to a consulting firm hired 6 months earlier, one known for reshaping culture fit. Its founder had written a paper questioning whether diversity fast tracks returned real value. She added his name to her wall, right next to the others. 2 days later, Leona uploaded a new report to the strategy team, a meticulous analysis of expansion possibilities through underutilized market verticals. She had spent 3 weeks compiling it, hours of comparative research, model simulations, and layered data visualization. She printed 5 copies on textured stock, embossed with the firm's crest. The digital version was titled using the proper internal protocol, strategic viability assessment, secondary verticals 2025-2030. It was flawless. But when she checked the system archive later that afternoon, her report had been renamed. Its title now read, Draft Research Reference. Unreviewed content. She blinked. Opened the entry log. No editor listed. No reviewer. Just a status change and a new tag. She emailed the operations team to clarify. The automated response thanked her for her training contribution and informed her that all learning track documents would be reviewed on a quarterly cycle. She hadn't enrolled in any training track. The system had quietly placed her there. She followed up with the executive assistant managing submission reviews. The reply was short. We were instructed to deprioritize any reports without departmental endorsement. Apologies if that wasn't clear. Her name had been stripped from her own labor. That week, during a partner lunch briefing, she printed another set of her report and walked in calm, steady, prepared. At the doorway, a junior coordinator blocked her path with a gentle smile. "Are you here with catering?" he asked. She paused, then nodded once. Without a word, she placed her report on a table near the untouched pamphlets and quietly stepped back. No one picked it up. On Friday, a pitch she had shaped in whispers and drafts, her language, her framework, her timeline, was presented by someone else. A senior analyst. He stood at the front of the conference room, gesturing with confidence, guiding the audience through a revised version of her model. Color shifted, rebranded, group attributed. His name echoed in praise. Applause followed. Leona sat at the back. Her name wasn't on the guest list. She heard phrases she had coined. watched ideas she had raised be spoken like they had floated into existence from the air. When the meeting ended, one of the senior partners walked past her without looking. He dropped a crumpled napkin onto the floor beside her chair. She picked it up, did not speak. She never did. That night, in the glow of her desk lamp at home, she added a new term to her report: reputation attrition mechanisms, passive discreditation. Through systemic language framing, it read more like a lab manual than a diary. That was intentional. It kept her heart out of it. Because to survive the slow crushing, she had to make it data. She no longer talked about these things at work. Trust had rotted. A marketing rep had smiled at her too often, never said hello. A man in compliance once offered support, then vanished. Everyone moved with careful silence, and soon that silence moved through her too. The following Monday, a file landed in her inbox: internal talent review, confidential, manager access only. It had been sent by mistake. Curious, she opened it. Dozens of names were listed under performance tiers. Tier 1, rising leaders. Tier 2, future potential. Tier 3, at risk but coachable. Her name wasn't there. Not in any section. She hadn't been flagged. She hadn't been forgotten. She had been erased. As if she had never been hired at all. But she had her records, her version of the truth. Over 400 entries now, across 5 directories, 3 internal chains. Countless approvals. They had buried her credentials, dismantled her title, unhooked her identity from the systems that tracked worth, all while pretending it had never happened. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know she wasn't just another intern or analyst or hopeful trying to climb the invisible ladder. Leona Hart had never entered through their front door. She wasn't part of their recruitment pipeline. Not flagged as high potential. Not pushed forward in any mentorship program. She had been embedded, placed quietly through a high-level directive, her employment executed under a pseudonymous trust. Her authority didn't come from HR. It came from the top, from the chairman of the board, the man who had built this empire and now wanted to test its foundation. She wasn't here to rise. She was here to reveal. On the morning of the quarterly Leadership Assembly, a gathering for senior executives and selected observers, Leona dressed with quiet precision. No heels, black tailored pants, fitted blouse, leather belt, steel buckle. Her hair was full, natural, parted with care. Not tamed, framed. She arrived 10 minutes before the start. A woman at the door blinked at her name badge, clearly confused. Leona didn't stop. She walked past her and took a seat, front row, center aisle. Around her, conversations hiccuped. A few staff exchanged looks. Some checked the attendee list on their phones. Her name wasn't there. Still, no one asked her to leave, because no one was sure they could. At precisely 9 a.m., the lights dimmed. A soft piano piece played, the firm's investor anthem. Above the stage, the company crest glowed. Then he walked in. The chairman, silver hair, sharp 3-piece suit, no notes, no smile. He stepped to the center of the stage. "Good morning," he said. The room fell still. He continued, "Today, I will not be sharing quarterly figures. You already know those. This morning is not about performance. It's about direction, legacy, leadership." Chairs shifted. Ties were adjusted, smiles rehearsed. The chairman's voice deepened as he continued, slow and certain. "I've spent the last 18 months preparing for a transition. My time as chairman is drawing to a close, and our future demands a leader who knows this company not just from boardroom briefings, but from its hallways, its missteps, and its truths." The stillness in the room sharpened. Eyes blinked, but no one spoke. He scanned the room. This person has watched in silence, been tested without armor, and faced what many of you have chosen to ignore. She has been challenged, dismissed, and underestimated, yet she never folded. She learned. She listened. She remembered. He paused. The entire auditorium held its breath. Your next chief executive officer is already in this room. Chairs creaked. The moment hung. Then Leona Hart. The name echoed. No applause followed. Only a hum of stunned air and a ripple of turning heads. Leona remained still. Back. Straight. Hands clasped. No smile. No blink. As if the storm had always been waiting just beneath her skin. The chairman did not waver. Leona has been a strategic equity holder in this company for over a year. Her trust, filed under the name Stonebell Holdings, currently owns 14% of our voting shares. Gasps trickled. She has served in an observational executive role under a non-disclosure agreement, reporting directly to me. Her task was to evaluate our leadership culture, to observe without disrupting, to test the company's immune system. He let the weight of those words settle. What she endured was not just anticipated. It was inevitable. And every slight, every obstruction, every false smile has been documented. A low murmur rippled across the rows. Some looked pale. Others shrank into their collars. Dane Colcroft, seated 2 rows behind her, leaned forward, his face blank, bloodless. The chairman's tone sharpened. This organization's failure to recognize potential when it doesn't look like legacy is not just a flaw. It is a liability. He turned. Leona, would you please join me on stage? She stood, slowly, no rush. The silence wasn't surprise anymore. It was fear. Pride, bruised by its own assumptions. She didn't look left or right as she walked. Her steps were steady. The weight of decades, not her own, shifted with each stride. At the side of the stage sat a slim laptop. Closed but glowing faintly. She opened it, typed a passcode, pressed her thumb to the sensor. The screen shifted from blue to black to silver. Her initials etched across the interface. LH. This was not an employee dashboard. This was the master node. The system reserved for the chief executive alone. No transition team, no confirmation, no delay. As she moved through the settings, redirecting control, and reassigning protocols, the main projector synced with her screen. The organizational chart unfolded in real time. Her name appeared at the top, every line restructured around her. The lights dimmed further. The room cooled. The system updated live. Behind her, the chairman stepped back, hands folded, face proud. Done. She clicked a file labeled Cultural Audit, Phase 3. The screen filled with redacted timelines, incident logs, metadata reports. No names, just context, receipts, proof, audio clips. Screenshots, email chains, not accusations, just exposure. Someone in the center row gasped. Others looked at the floor. One rose to leave, but the door locks clicked. Let it settle. The chairman said softly. Leona remained still. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. The data did. She spoke finally. Her voice calm, low. You taught me what power looks like when it feels safe. Now I'll return the lesson. She closed the file. The screen went black. The lights rose. She stepped down. Her heels echoing with each strike against the tile. No one clapped. No one dared. She walked straight to Dane Vexley. He hadn't moved. His face looked frozen, hollowed. She handed him a white envelope, sealed, embossed. Inside, a reassignment notice. Effective immediately. Advisory status only. Non-operational. Under Ethics Committee review. Pension maintained. Title retained. Authority revoked. He took it. Said nothing. Looked up once, but not into her eyes. She didn't offer comfort. She offered closure. Around her, nervous glances ricocheted between leadership ranks. There, seats were no longer positions of privilege. They were liabilities. She walked out. No speech, no goodbye, just presence. In the lobby, the receptionist stood for the first time. Ms. Hart. "Should I call security?" she asked, voice barely. Steady, Leona gave a small smile. "No, that won't be necessary." The automatic doors opened, and it was as if the entire building finally acknowledged her. Across the street, 3 black SUVs waited, legal teams. Media teams. The embargo would lift in under an hour. Her first executive order as CEO. A full, independent audit, recruitment, promotions, attrition patterns over the past 5 years. No one expected it. But within 48 hours, the ripples became waves. The findings weren't ambiguous, they were systemic. Departments that habitually downranked internal candidates of color, flagged. Managers who hired externally to avoid qualified women, named. Projects that had failed, traced back to. Political sabotage, budget tampering, title erosion, invisible vetoes. At the center stood 3 board members, celebrated, polished, powerful, and implicated. A special shareholder session convened in 5 days. Legal teams, internal and external, gathered evidence. Leona didn't open that session. She didn't need to. The files did. Hundreds of documents, Slack messages, email trails, performance review edits. Even memos suggesting departments weren't ready for certain types of leadership. Then came voices, former interns, past employees, even quiet collaborators who had turned. She hadn't asked them to come, but they came anyway. That changed everything. The vote was unanimous. 3 executives removed. Golden parachutes frozen. Stock options locked. Calendars scrubbed. No ceremony, just silence. They left the boardroom one by one. No cameras, no goodbyes. Only the weight of finally being seen. Leona entered after they had gone. She stood in the doorway. "This is the beginning of cleanup," she said. Then she left. The message spread fast. No one is above accountability. HR launched a public directive, mandatory retraining for all leaders. On bias, on culture, on systems. Failure to complete it, bonuses withheld, demotions reviewed. No more whisper campaigns. Now there were policies. Employees spoke. Some were angry, some relieved, some just quiet. Even the stock dropped briefly. But within days, it surged again. Not from spin, from clarity. Investors saw what it meant. Not chaos, credibility. But by day 3, after Leona's calm and clear press release, the company's stock bounced back stronger than before. Analysts began to understand. This wasn't chaos. This was cleanup, and cleanup meant credibility. Clients who had once pulled back quietly returned. Universities reached out, wanting to restart paused partnerships. Even rival firms issued public statements calling the shift at Paragon a long overdue step in corporate repair. Inside the company, subtle but powerful changes began to show. Office doors once always shut were left ajar. People greeted each other in hallways with sincerity, not suspicion. A few employees started printing their department records, some out of fear, others out of hope. Leona kept a low profile that week. She didn't appear in interviews or sit for profiles. She stayed in her office, door always open, but few entered. Not out of fear, but out of quiet respect. Everyone knew things were no longer the same. Dane Colcroft, now reduced to a quiet advisory role, arrived daily on the 5th floor at exactly 8:30 a.m. He wore the same suit, carried the same folder, but the authority he once moved with had drained away. A year after that pivotal boardroom moment, Paragon no longer looked like the place it used to be. The stiff, silent hallways buzzed now with cautious optimism. People who had once whispered in corners now shared ideas freely. Outdated leadership, Programs, those built around familiarity and favor, were replaced by systems based on proof, performance, and equity. It was no longer about knowing how to belong. It was about being worth listening to. Leona never sought the spotlight. Her work echoed in policy, in structure, in the quiet way power moved differently now. Her presence remained steady, shaping reforms across departments, gently removing silence from the corners of the company's soul. She wasn't there to celebrate. She was there to rebuild. And slowly, even the people began to change. Dane changed. The same man who had once smirked behind polished glass walls now arrived early and left late. He didn't speak with authority anymore. He spoke with curiosity. He listened more than he talked. He took notes in training sessions. He sat in on discussions where junior staff spoke freely. He asked questions that didn't hide behind ego. At first, no one believed it. They thought he was surviving, masking, rebranding. But he didn't flinch anymore when accountability stared him down. He didn't explain away the past. He didn't hide behind what he meant. He named what he did. When asked why he didn't resign, he replied, "Leaving would have been easier. Staying means learning in full view." He completed every training, not just the required ones. He volunteered to sit in on peer coaching sessions, not as a leader, but as a learner. In one memorable session, he worked with a young analyst 15 years his junior. She had once been mistaken for support staff simply because of her accent. After she finished presenting her work, Dane stood. He clapped gently. "This," he said, "is what leadership should have looked like all along." Someone in the room quietly recorded it. The video never went public, but it was shared internally. Passed hand to hand like something rare, not of power claimed, but of power surrendered. Months later, at a university panel on organizational repair, Dane took the stage, not as a keynote, but as a testimony. He spoke plainly. "I spent 18 years thinking leadership meant control," he said. "But real leadership? It's the courage to speak after you've been wrong, to lead without needing to be the smartest in the room." He fumbled some lines. He wasn't polished, but no one questioned his sincerity. He left the stage not to applause, but to a deep, thoughtful silence. That autumn, an announcement went out from the CEO's office. The Heart Initiative was launching, a mentorship network built to develop executive talent from underrepresented communities in tech, finance, and policy. Its mission, end gatekeeping. Build guided empowerment instead. Universities, NGOs, and grassroots groups all signed on. The kickoff event didn't happen in a tower. It was hosted in a repurposed brick building downtown. Sunlight through tall windows, wooden tables, no stage, no title plates. Just people. Leona arrived early. No camera crews, no media statements. She stood quietly in the back, listening. Young professionals shared stories of being told they weren't leadership material, of being mistaken for tongue, of surviving spaces not built for them. One woman spoke of leading a statewide reform after being laughed out of a training program. Leona clapped quietly. One young man shared how he had to unlearn apologizing for existing. She nodded. When it was her turn, she stepped forward. Notes, no slides, she spoke slowly. "The systems that ignore us teach us to endure," she said. "But endurance isn't the goal. Belonging is." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. After the event, Dane stepped to the volunteer table. He filled out a mentorship form. "No preferences," he said. "Just give me someone who's ready." No one questioned his intent. Leona saw him from across the room. Their eyes met. She nodded. He nodded back. No apology, no invitation. Just two people standing on opposite sides of change. Not bound by shame. Not bonded by revenge, but by choice. To face who they had been and choose who they might become. Paragon didn't erase its past. They published it, turned it into curriculum, embedded it into promotion policy. It became a case study, not of scandal, but of healing. And at the center stood the woman they once dismissed. Not in the spotlight, but at the root. Leona never called it redemption. She called it repair. And she built it one truth at a time. What part of this journey stayed with you the most? Was it the quiet strength, the reckoning, or the rebuilding that stirred something inside you? Drop a comment sharing your thoughts, your city, or your own story. Because stories like these aren't just fiction. They're reflections. And if you believe more people need to hear voices rising through silence, don't just scroll away, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay connected.